Today is March 10th, 2021, and I am calling this Zoom conference to discuss newly emerged evidence in regards to the FDA's recommendations to Northwestern at the time of a clinical trial that was performed without patient's consent and without FDA authorization. I'd like to thank Dr. David Egelman from Brown University, a bioethicist, who's going to listen in on the call, has reviewed many of the documents, and look forward to hearing his comments. We have Dr. Al Edwards, who's one of the patients that was participating in the trial without his consent. Tony Vahulis, who also was another one of the patients, and was the first patient to recognize, because she was one of the first patients who got the prototype, that she had a prototype in her heart. And then Maureen and Chess Obermeyer. Maureen also received the device and had significant severe adverse events. So does anyone have any questions before I start? I have a little PowerPoint I'm going to present.
Yeah.
You're all good? Okay. All right, so I'm going to get the PowerPoint and then we'll start here. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Right.
let's see, let me move this over. Okay, great. So we're going to talk about the evidence. And what I tried to do was briefly summarize 13 years of trying to get, what I believe is an eyewitness to what happened, information to all the patients that received these protocols that were experimental, never adopted by the FDA, and quite frankly, never adopted by the company. So Northwestern University and Hospital was approached by Edwards Life Sciences in conjunction with the Chief of Cardiac Surgery, Dr. Patrick McCarthy, to perform experimental heart surgeries because they needed safety data prior to getting any type of approval and for the development of the device. So I'm going to focus on the one device because I have the most knowledge and experience in these patients because they were my patients before I removed myself from the protocol. So what they needed 100 patients to test the prototype McCarthy ring and calipers prior to any application for FDA approval. They used a protocol, and this number is important, 1532004, and this was confirmed over and over again by the FDA in several letters that patient data was necessary prior to the use of this device. So the MIXO study continued from March of 06 to November of 07 in 100 patients and was published in July of 2008. And in the publication in the top journal of cardiac surgery in North America, the Journal of Thoracic and Cardiovascular Surgery, the study authors claimed there was FDA approval, informed consent, and there were no heart attacks and no deaths. And they mentioned only one reoperation, not all the reoperations that occurred. So making the study seem very safe and that they had all the federal regulatory approvals in place. What's missing from this study, and this is very significant because they had 100 patients, and I'm going to give you a large number of complications. There were 2 heart attacks, and 2 of you will describe what happened. There were 2 deaths, and these deaths were known to the company and reported to the FDA on October 28th, 2008. This was discovered during the Senate investigation. I'll comment on that in a little bit. There were at least 17 reoperations, and those were listed in the MOD database. And I was trying to keep track of it, although the events would go up and go down and the MOD database would change, but at the peak there was 17. And I was been trying to tell this to the FDA since the very beginning, the ones that I knew about. And on December 19th, 2018, there were family members and some of the patients and myself met with the FDA Midwest Director for Research for 3.5 hours and reported the adverse events and reported the testing. What the company never revealed to the patients and did not reveal in the letters that you're about to hear about that there were 122 product defects discovered in the prototype device during the testing in the patients. So they developed a ring, brought it to the operating room, tested it in patients, had all sorts of clinical adverse events, and then they tested in the bioengineering lab and found 122 product defects, like the silicone wasn't attaching well, the titanium was corroded, they found infected material, they found loose threads, and these were the same devices that were placed in the patients. They reported this to the Senate Finance Committee, but never reported it to the patients, never reviewed in the patients to know if there's any safety issues in the future. The company sold the device from 2007 and 2008 after the clinical testing, but never registered the device. They placed it in a total of 667 patients before the FDA even knew it was being sold across state lines, and never, of course, told the patients. In July of 2008, Tony Vahulis and myself, we contacted the FDA. We told them that this was happening. The FDA could not find any documentation, any registration. And Tony faxed her device identifier card to the FDA, saw that there was a prototype listed because it was called the McCarthy ring, and placed the device on recall on December 4th, 2008. So, what's new in this saga of failure to inform patients of device testing? So, a letter has emerged from the Senate investigation. This letter was written to the CEO of Northwestern University and Hospital, Dean Harrison, on November 26, 2008. So, just to refresh your memory, the study started on March of '06. It ended on November of 2007. It was published in July of 2008. And then the FDA learned about it in July of 2008. Had no idea until the publication came out and we reported it. And in this letter, Dean Harrison wrote to the FDA wrote, Doreen Kieser, a very high up FDA official, said, in order to ensure appropriate notification of subjects, the FDA suggests you contact Edwards Life Sciences to ascertain if a registry was used in the application to the agency. Okay, this is significant because, first of all, the FDA is telling the CEO, after a full inspection of the human subject research records, that there was a registry. They can tell that there was no informed consent, and that they believe that there should be information given to the patients. And also, not only that, but information given to the patients that their heart surgery is going to be used by the company to garner FDA approval, which is market share, which is incentive, financial incentive for the company. So again, the FDA tells Dean Harrison, inform all the patients because their data is going to be used to get an FDA approval for the third version of the device 3 years later. And what also was reported in the Senate investigation is that the university knew that the testing was ongoing because they received research funding grants from the company for participating in the study. So, meaning the company told the university, reported it to Senator Grassley, but never told the patients and never offered any type of incentive for them to participate in the study. Dean Harrison then wrote 2 letters, January 2009 and May of 2009. And 2 of the 3 of you, the patients that are on this call, received these letters. And in the letter, they don't mention that the device is experimental. We consider this device to be FDA approved, and there's no mention that your data is going to be used for an eventual FDA approval of the device. Let's take this one step further. On July 16th, 2009, the FDA wrote Tony Vahulis confirming that the device is experimental, and wrote the letter on behalf of then President Obama, who was a former senator, and Senator Durbin, and said she would be hearing more from the Senate, and she hasn't. So confirming that the prototype, the Mixo ring and the McCarthy ring, never received approval as of today and is still considered investigational. So this is now 2009, almost 3 years after her first surgery. Let's take this one step further. So the letter that Doreen Kieser wrote to Dean Harrison, the CEO, saying you need to let the patients know that their data is being used to get approved. And the FDA confirms that the data was used to get the FDA approval. They write Senator Lugar and said, look, the company's applied for approval. They've changed the name, they've changed the indication. But by the way, we believe this is totally safe because the publication, the Mixo publication, reveals no heart attacks, no deaths, no perioperative events, heart attacks. And so we're assuming that this newly modified device, because it went through several modifications prior to selling the new version, the DebtLogix, and said it was safe to approve. Then comes the next disaster in 2017. So again, the FDA told the CEO of the hospital, you need to tell the patients. None of this has happened. 2017, the FDA reverses the decision and then says to Congressman Glenn Grothman out of Wisconsin, because that's where my private practice is, says, we're not going to inform the patients. We don't want to upset them, which is a big mistake because the patients still need to know that what happened in 2006 to 2008 is still affecting people, especially those that don't know that they received this experimental prototype. And reversing this decision on a recall device is really in violation of the federal regulations and the federal code. And another important part of this whole investigation is that the university asked the doctor to stop the study back in 2007. They found that he wasn't giving consent. And this was revealed to us when we went to meet with the Minneapolis FDA in 2018, that the surgeon had terminated the protocol, agreed to stop the experiments and no publications, but he continued on until 2008. And then most recently, I was attending a virtual surgical meeting because of COVID. And as of May of 2020, in an abstract presentation, the protocol, which Northwestern terminated back in July of 2007, has continued on in until at least May of 2020 in 1,044 patients. Still no consent because I've had some of those patients that were in this group of test subjects met with the FDA in Minneapolis and confirmed that one of the patients died in November of 2018 after reoperation, and another patient had a severe massive heart attack in late 2008. This is again the terminated protocol. So I'm going to now have Dr. Al Edwards speak about what happened to him and share his thoughts on the experience he's had as a result of these violations.
Thank you, Dr. Rajamanan. I think first off, with the clinical study, that was information that was withheld from me. There was a research nurse of sorts who entered my room and asked me if I would like to be in a study. Because of my occupation at the time, I could really not consent to a study, and I told her no. That was in February of 2007. However, with the various communications, as referenced from what Dr. Rajamanan just presented, I inquired of the IRB in June of 2011, and they in fact told me via written letter that my data had been used in a clinical study. So that's a real violation as far as I'm concerned. I don't consider myself a total expert on IRBs, but I have been a voting member of 2 IRBs, and I think I can, let's say, tell a clinical study when I see one. In retrospect, based on the nurse's behavior and all the data that have been revealed, this is a clinical study. There is no question in my mind. Onward from there, I finally gained access to my actual electronic chart. This was delayed for a number of reasons, including another diagnosis that I had. Anyway, in July of 2018, I gained electronic access to my chart. And in reviewing it, I found out that I did in fact have elevations of troponin indicative of a heart attack within a couple of minutes after my surgery, and also within approximately 12 hours. These results were reported to the IRB, and I expressed the need to report a research injury to them, albeit later in this whole sequence of events. However, I received no communication from them in return. So this is a very bad situation for patients. In addition to my own numerous medical visits, my need for a pacemaker, my need for a second ablation, which did put me in normal sinus rhythm for a while. However, I have dropped out of normal rhythm once again. So this is a very persistent and frustrating situation, not only for me, but I should also reflect on certain family members who continue to search for the cause of all these medical irregularities. And I'm concluding now, after these 13 years, that there really is only one reason for all this, and that is the illegal heart ring that was implanted into my heart. Thank you.
No, thank you. It's very, very, very upsetting. And I've heard the story so many times, and I'm hearing it again. And you know, it's just not acceptable in modern medicine and in the United States. I'll have Maureen Obermeyer talk about her adverse event. I really appreciate you all being here and speaking again. It's not easy, but we're trying to protect patients in the future from ever having to go through this.
Thank you, Dr. Rajamanan. I had surgery in November of 2006, and it was a very bad experience at Northwestern. They released me and never told me that I had had a heart attack. I followed up with my regular cardiologist who ran all sorts of tests, and within a couple months, I had an implanted defibrillator, pacemaker. Not only did I have a heart attack during the surgery, which I didn't find out for like 5 years, and the EKG from the surgery was in the shadow file of Dr. Patrick McCarthy. So at that point was the first time I knew that it was acknowledged that I'd had a heart attack. It's hard to believe that I never had there was no informed consent whatsoever. No one discussed anything with me. And the first time I even found out that the ring was developed by Dr. McCarthy was when I received my ID card in the mail. And it said McCarthy angioplasty ring. And I was surprised because he had never mentioned to me that there was a possibility that he might be using a ring he developed. And it's just hard to believe that patients can basically be used, we were experimented on, and that nobody will do anything about it or stop this kind of behavior by physicians and institutions. It's mind-boggling.
Well, and thank you so much, Maureen. And you know, for Al and for Maureen, knowing that you had severely elevated troponin levels in a hospital that's a level 1 hospital for treatment of heart attacks. So, especially if they're in the hospital. So Al's troponin levels were going up. Maureen's, not only were her troponin levels going up, but she was having severe malignant cardiac arrhythmias that required shock, adrenaline, epinephrine, and amiodarone. And no one was explaining to her why they were rushing in with the code card, trying to restore her rhythm over the first 24 hours when she was suffering this massive heart attack. No one brought her back to the operating room and restored the blood flow to the heart where the heart attack happened. So it's not only just the testing, but it was the cover up and the concealment of the event that's of if they could have reversed and opened up the artery, then a lot of the complications could have been mitigated. So it's a whole domino effect of concealment and cover up to try to say we had no heart attacks in our study. Okay, so Tony, we started together on this journey, and I'm going to have you speak about what happened. Thank you.
I'm so sorry. Thank you, Dr. Rajaman. I was 38 years old at the time. I received the Mitzel ring, the AtriCure, and the caliper that was not FDA approved. Had many complications. When I went to see Dr. McCarthy at the time, he said to me, "You're going to be receiving one of these devices," and he handed me a brochure. I received a brochure. I took it home, and after the surgery, I continued to feel worse than before my surgery. And he told me that I would feel like $1 million right after the surgery. And I couldn't understand why I was feeling worse after I came out of the surgery. As the time went by and I was getting worse and worse, my symptoms were getting, I had worse shortness of breath and more fatigue. I looked at that brochure and going through it, I didn't see the ring that Dr. McCarthy said he was going to implant in me. And I've noticed that after I received the card in the mail, and it said 5100 McCarthy anaplasty ring. So I was looking and searching for that ring in the pamphlet so I can do some research and see what other people were dealing with and how long it took them to recover. I received the second heart surgery a year later. I had a redo maze. I had a mitral valve, and at the same time, I had a tricuspid ring. I asked Dr. Gilanoff at the time why he redid the maze procedure, and he told me he did it better. Well, after a couple of days, I ended up having a pacemaker. My heart rate wasn't going up. My heart rate dropped to 40, and with activity, my heart rate wasn't going up. And I got the pacemaker, and I went back to Northwestern after I left Cleveland Clinic, and the nurse, Mary, they paced my pacemaker wrong because it was beating over 130 beats a minute. And Dr. Rajamanan took me to Mayo Clinic. And after the gentleman that was testing my pacemaker, he said, your pacemaker, you've already have like the battery life, it's 8 years, 7, 8 years. I said, well, I just got the pacemaker. So he said, they're pacing your heart at 130 beats a minute. So he adjusted the setting, and literally in less than 20 minutes, I felt like a new person. For the 2-3 months after they adjusted my pacemaker, I felt my body just constantly trembling, quivering. That's my story. It's so much information. It's hard to put all these years in like 5 minutes of interview. But it's still a struggle. Every single day is a struggle.
Tony, we are so grateful that you are on this call. You know, you and I learned of it first. You were within the first 10 patients. And not only did you get the McCarthy ring, the calipers, but you got the AtriCure, which hadn't received its FDA approval yet, and had to have two maze, mechanical valve, and a pacemaker. And you're on lifelong Coumadin. So all these complications could have been avoided if the standard of care had been done. So it's a complete disaster. That's my thoughts. We have an expert on this call, Dr. Egelman from Brown University. If you have any questions for the patients or any comments, I know you've reviewed these letters and heard the story over the years, and really appreciate you being with us today.
Or, let me just try to make clear some of the issues. First, you saw signed surgical consents, right? Consent to have the surgery done?
Yeah, they
Yes.
signed surgical.
Yes.
Yes.
Did that consent didn't say what procedure, what device you were going to get, I take it?
No,
No.
No,
Okay.
it did not.
And that consent did not have anything in it saying that it was not an approved or a cleared device?
No.
no,
No.
Did it say the device was FDA approved?
it didn't even mention the,
Device at all?
no,
No, I've reviewed the consents. There was no mention of.
no.
Okay, and were any of you told during the consent what possible side effects the surgery might have?
Mm,
Was that on the consent? Even anesthesia risk?
They had the general standard risks placed on the consent. So the risk with the mitral valve repair, with the standard of care, there's a risk of stroke, heart attack, or death. They always mention that, but they didn't mention it that they were receiving the prototype device and the potential risk with that. None of that was mentioned.
Okay,
Dr. Egelman, if it's any help to you, the consent was the same for my heart ring implant as it was for my pacemaker implant. It was just a generic sort of stock consent form for surgery.
didn't the pacemaker implant say what device you were getting? No?
No, I had specified exactly what pacemaker I was getting, because by this time, being a former FDA person, I was very suspicious of the entire device process. So I went through extraordinary detail with the people at Medtronic as to exactly what device was going to be implanted under what circumstances, and almost down to the serial number of the device.
Okay. And didn't the FDA at some point retrospectively approve the device in some way?
They didn't give it a retrospective approval. So that was the letter that Tony received from the FDA. They said that the McCarthy and the Mixel ring were not approved. They were investigational. They gave a new device with the new name, the new indication, the approval, but there was no retroactive approval. And
Okay.
they also said that she would be hearing from people from via the FDA, via the congressional office. And that didn't happen.
And it wasn't approved, right? It was cleared? Was
It
just
the-
cleared, right?
Five
It was
ten
a,
K, yeah, the third, that new name, new indication was 510K cleared.
it's 510K cleared, right? It
Yeah.
was never approved.
No, no PMA.
Correct. It was 510K cleared. And if you look closely at the FDA establishment report for Los Angeles, this device went through recall in December, I believe, of 2008, which was prior to the approval. And all the devices that were listed, that Dr. Rajamanan talked about relative to the 122 defects were all recalled. And subsequently, there was additional manufacturing done for new model 5100 rings, which was what they got their clearance on.
Okay, and so when the when the recall went out, obviously they're not taking these out of patients. They're taking them. Was McCarthy the only one who was implanting these?
No, they were selling it across the US market.
So this was going on all over the place. Those
The first-
100 patients were not all McCarthy's.
The first 100 patients were McCarthy's, and then after that, it was all over the place.
When did it become all over the place? Sometime in 2008,
2007.
2007.
Yeah.
And do those go into this recent abstract?
I have no idea.
Okay, so I'm just trying to get the timeline now. So in 2007, the study was told to terminate,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So McCarthy couldn't put him in, but there were other physicians
No,
across.
he put them in.
I know he wasn't supposed to put them in.
Right, that's
Right.
correct.
Okay, but he kept putting them in.
Yes,
Right. He kept implanting them post withdrawal of any approval of his protocol or any review of his informed consent process.
Right, but other physicians across the country had begun to put these in at some point in time, right? In
yeah,
2007, is that,
2007. That's correct.
in what month was that?
July 2007.
Okay, so do we know how many were put in besides the 100?
557.
That's the total, including the 100, or
Yes, 667 total. That's what the FDA wrote to Senator Lugar.
okay. And that stopped with the recall.
Yes,
It stopped McCarthy stopped putting them in after the recall. Is that right or no?
correct. Everybody did.
Everybody stopped because they had a new device.
No, everybody stopped because the FDA hadn't cleared the device and they were trying to figure out what to do.
Okay, when did they come up with the new device?
In April of 2009.